Hello? Okay. Is that fine? Yeah. Okay, so throughout we'll start with the set of variables as x, and we'll partition them into y and z, and then we'll be looking at this matrix where the rows are going to be monomials in the y variables, the columns are going to be monomials in the z variables, and every entry is the coefficient of this times this of so that's the thing that we're going to look at. So here's a quiz question. So the matrix we're going to build for every polynomial, and this is going to be the coefficient if this row is indexed by m1 with some monomial in y, and column is indexed by m2 which is some monomial in z, then this entry is going to be the coefficient of the monomial m1 times m2 in the polynomial f. So that's the definition. This is the partial derivative matrix. This is what we are going to be studying in this talk. Here's a question. What is the rank of sigma, or rather m of what did I do? M sub something? Yeah. So if I take the polynomial to be the elementary symmetric polynomial, do I expect this rank to be large? Do I expect this rank to be small? Take any partition that you want. So take the set of variables into y and z, and do we expect this to be large? So in the previous thing we sort of said that if we take each row as to be the partial derivatives over all variables listed out, then we knew that this rank was very large because it was the disjointness matrix. But now we are sort of the rows are indexed by monomials only in the y variables, and in some sense you are taking a partial derivative with respect to only those, and now you are listing them out. Do you expect this rank to be large or small? And the answer is it's small. I'll let you figure out what exactly. I mean, it's actually no quotes. I mean, it's actually small. The reason for that is precisely the expression that we looked at there. This is a formula for computing sigma d, and this is a sum of product of univariates.
What is beta?
Betas are all some field elements. These are betas and alphas are scalars from the field, and this is an expression which is a sum of product of univariates. So therefore this is small. Now some of you might ask, but wait, this is something that is true only if the field was large enough, because I can do interpolation. So if I work over a small field, do I expect this to be small? Well, it will turn out no, and it's an easy thing to check. And for someone who has not seen the partial derivative matrix and so on, this is something that I think people should try out just to get comfortable with it. So let me just point out that this is small over any field. Over any field, this matrix will have very small rank. No.
Rank is in the field, because you can always go.
You can always go to an extension. Yes, that's something you can do. But
it's even better.
It's d plus 1. So okay, so let me just write down. So look at the following bunch of matrices. So this is a d plus 1 cross d plus 1 matrix. This is this times x2. And you multiply these out together. And it's easy to observe that once you multiply them out together, this entry, the top right entry that you're going to end up getting, will be precisely sigma d. It's an easy check. And the other statement that I said, that whenever I have a read once branching program of width w, the rank is at most w. This will say that the rank is at most d plus 1. This is one proof, or you could just explicitly write down the matrix and see what this looks like. But yeah, but just to convince, this was just to illustrate that even though both matrices are in some sense partial derivatives, they behave very, very differently. At least that was one of the points of. Okay. So in this we are going, in this lecture, so we'll use the partial derivative matrix in order to prove lower bounds for a model called multilinear formulas. Let me define what the model is. I didn't do it last time. So we know what a multilinear polynomial is. It is a polynomial where the individual degree of every variable is at most 1. So there are no xi squared sort of terms. And just like we define homogeneous formula to be one where every gate computes a homogeneous polynomial, we'll define a multilinear formula to be a formula where every gate computes a multilinear polynomial. Okay, this is the definition of multilinear formulas. And what does this mean? Another way of looking at it is that suppose I have a multiplication gate, and I have two children which computes f and g. Then this in particular means that the variables that f depends on and the variable that g depends on must be disjoint, because otherwise you will have square terms. So this is the definition of multilinear formulas, and yes. So in this setting, for multilinear formulas and syntactic multilinear formulas, if this was your definition, they're identical. Because you will never reuse computation. If it so turns out that this guy didn't depend on xi, you can just cut those leaves off. So Raj showed that any multilinear formula computing the n cross n determinant requires size n power omega log n. So he gave a super polynomial lower bound, in fact n power log n lower bound for any multilinear formula that computes the n cross n symbolic determinant. Okay, and as we have seen earlier, the determinant can indeed be computed by poly-size circuits, but if you restrict your computation to be multilinear formulas, then you can't. Nice thing would have been to say that any multilinear circuit computing the determinant must be super polynomial size, but we don't know of multilinear circuit lower bounds yet. Okay, but I don't know of anything better than n factorial. Basically just writing it as a sum of monomials.
So the VP circuit for it is
No,
not?
it's not. And strangely, for the permanent, the best multilinear formula we know is of size 2 to the n. 2 to the n times n squared. This is Reiser's formula that we saw the previous time. So there are better depth 3 circuits known, but they are heavily non-multilinear, heavily non-homogeneous. But in terms of multilinear formulas for determinant, let's say even at depth, so no, at depth 3 actually we have lower bounds. We'll see a proof of that. For depth 3 we know that any multilinear depth 3 circuit computing the determinant not just has size this, but exponential. It will be 2 power omega, 2 power n to the epsilon or something of that sort. We'll see a proof of that. But we don't know of even small multilinear circuits for the determinant. This result says that multilinear formulas for determinants must be of super polynomial size. For multilinear circuits, we don't know. Okay. So this is what we are. I'll hint at the proof of this, but instead I will try to give the full proof of multilinear depth 3 lower bounds, because that will have most of the ideas, and it'll get us a little more comfortable with this measure and so on. And I'll also describe what one needs to do in order to get multilinear formula lower bounds. Okay, good. So what's a multilinear depth 3 circuit? It's a depth 3 circuit where every intermediate computation is a multilinear computation. So the only thing that you need to care about is the product gate, because the product gate is going to multiply a few linear polynomials together, and I want to make sure that this linear polynomials, when I multiply them together, I end up with a multilinear polynomial. So that's the same as saying that I have something that looks like Li1 of xi1, Lid of xid. Maybe I shouldn't call it small d, because so what I mean by this is that if I look at any term which is a product of linear polynomials, they actually are linear polynomials on disjoint sets of variables. This is what I have. This d could potentially be larger than the degree of the polynomial you are computing. So that could happen. Okay. And we want to prove lower bounds on S, where S is this top family. Okay. So this is going to be the goal, but before that, I just want to prove a few properties of how this matrix behaves when you take products or when you take sums and stuff like that. And okay. So let's say I have a f which is something that looks like g of x1 comma y1 times h of x2 comma y2, where all these are disjoint sets. I mean, no two guys intersect with each other. Now I'm interested in, so if I look at the matrix MF under the partition x comma y, where x is the union of these two guys and y is the union of these two guys. Okay, I want to know what does this matrix, can I write this matrix in terms of mg of x1 y1 times mh of x2 y2. So in some sense, these are the partial derivative matrices under this partition for the two factors. And I want to know, when I multiply them together, can I say anything about the partial derivative matrix for f? And it's an easy observation that this guy is actually the tensor product of, okay, what do I mean by the tensor product? I mean, it's so the tensor product of, if I have two matrices A and B, let's say this is a M cross M matrix and this is an N cross N matrix. The resulting matrix is an Mn cross Mn matrix, where, I mean, so you think of like so I have the matrix which is A11, A1m, AMM. This was the matrix A, but I'm replacing each block, I'm multiplying that by the matrix B. So I'm blowing up every entry by an N cross N matrix, so the appropriate entries. So this is what is called the tensor product, and it's a very, I mean, in fact, all the previous proofs that were seen, I mean, like in some sense, this is like just a generalization of this thing. It just says that if you're dealing with multilinear polynomials, then the monomials that you have behave in a very, very structured way. So if f is a product of two guys on distinct sets of variables, then the partial derivative matrix of f can be written as a tensor product of the partial derivative matrices of these two guys. And this in particular implies that the rank of MF with respect to x comma y, this equals the rank of mg times the rank of mh. Okay.
What is the use of multilinearity in the first equality?
So this is to make sure that whenever I have a certain monomial here, so let's think of it as x1 to the e1, x2 to the e2, x3 to the e3, sorry, y1 to the d1, y2 to the d2. By x and so on, I mean these sets. Then there is a very unique way in which you can get it from this product. You have to take the corresponding monomial x1 to the e1, y1 to the d1 from here, and multiply that with the corresponding monomial from that guy. So that will correspond to basically one entry of this matrix times one entry of this matrix, which is why you get the tensor product. Okay. Okay, great. So now here are some very okay. So now let's look at depth 3 and let's look at terms of the following. So I have something that looks like L1 blah 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 till some LD or maybe L capital D. And I want to understand the rank of the partial derivative matrix for a product of this form. Okay. Now, what is the rank of the partial derivative matrix for one Li? What can it be? I mean, the rank can be at most 2. Because if you have something that looks like xi plus yi, I mean, where x is there, and this will turn out to be a matrix that looks like this. But in general, I mean, in some sense, all you will care about is, so an Li will be something that looks like summation ai xi. And it's just a question of when you took the partition, did you actually split the linear polynomial, or did you put everything into one side? If you put everything into one side, the rank is going to be 1. But if you split the linear polynomial, the rank is going to be 2. That's it. So which means that whenever I have a term of this sort, so the rank is exactly equal to 2 power number of linear polynomials that are split. That's just from this guy. Okay. So let me just. Great. So now let's go back to the example we had the previous time, which is, so suppose I have something that looks like x1 plus y1 times xd plus yd. If I choose my partition such that the partitions are the x variables and the y variables, basically this is terrible because this guy is, I mean, every linear polynomial is going to be split, and therefore the rank is like 2 power d. It's as large as you could hope for it. But the insight of Raz was that suppose you took this example and you just picked up a random partition. You just randomly assigned the set of 2D variables into 2 buckets of D variables each. Now the point is, the probability that a single linear one of those guys is not going to be split, I mean, with some constant probability, you might end up putting both guys into the same bucket, right? So which means that on expectation, you would expect something like omega d of these terms to actually not contribute to rank because you would have ended up putting both the variables to the same bucket. So anytime you actually you chose your partition such that variables went to the same buckets, those linear polynomials are not going to contribute to the rank. So Raz's insight was that if I take this partition at random, I'm going to get a saving of about 2 to the omega d from the rank of this matrix. And this is the key insight here. Okay. Now, it is because I'm looking at a multilinear depth 3 circuit, so the LIs will be of disjoint. Because if there is a variable that occurs in both, you'll get a square term. Right? So therefore it sort of says that, okay, now, I mean, if it were the case that if I take a random and if each of these linear polynomials were sort of small, then with some non-constant probability, I mean, with some reasonable probability, I would be putting both these guys into the same bucket, in which case I'll save something.
But the goal is lower bound, so here is.
So okay, so this is how the overall picture is going to be. The building block is going to be a term of this sort, and mu is going to be the rank of the partial derivative matrix under a random partition. And I'm trying to claim that mu of a building block is small. All I mean by that is I want it to be bounded away from what I expect in general. For a typical polynomial, I will expect that matrix to be full rank. As long as I can shave off something from this, this is saying that, okay, now this will already mean that I need too many summons. So this is what we will, someone is excited. Yeah. So now, what I described right now is just saying that as long as the linear forms are small, like each linear form does not depend on too many variables, then a random partition is going to put them all on one side with some reasonable probability. The problem here is that the number of some of these linear forms could be huge. Let's say there's a linear form which just looks at x1 all the way to xn. Now the probability that a partition is going to put all n guys into one, or something like that, it's going to fall depending on how large this linear form is. For that I need to gain something. Okay, so let me just let this be there. Good. Okay, so now it will become important to keep track of what sort of parameters we are dealing with. So for a random n-variate multilinear polynomial, okay, I want to know how large do I expect this to be. This is the thing that I'm trying to beat, right? I want to make sure that the building blocks that I have are far from this number. Okay, so for a random polynomial, we expect a rank of m. For a random multilinear polynomial, say f, we expect this to be something like 2 power cardinality of x over 2. Right? You would expect this to be full rank. The matrix is a 2 power n by 2 cross 2 power n by 2 sort of matrix, and you expect this to be full rank. What I'm trying to beat is that. Now, let's get back to this. What is the trivial bound on this? The trivial bound on this was 2 power d. Now, how does d relate to n? Let's just rule out something. So suppose, let's say we are working with something like the determinant. The determinant is a degree, let's say n cross n determinant. The determinant is a degree n polynomial over n squared variables. So if I'm trying to beat something that looks like 2 power, in the sense that here the number of multilinear terms, because I have n squared variables, it could be as large as n squared over 2. I cannot hope to somehow shave off something from 2 power n squared over 2 and fight 2 power n by 2 there. Okay, no, am I saying this right? So what I want to make sure is that I want to make sure that the number of variables and the degree are not too far apart, because I want to get some control on how many such terms do I have and everything. So throughout, what we'll try to make sure is that d is something like, or rather, I want n to be something like 2d. The number of variables, the sort of regime of parameters we'll be looking at is n. The number of variables will be something like twice the degree of the polynomial. So determinant is not a good answer, but we'll project down the determinant. But for now, just think of it as the polynomial for which you are trying to prove is a random 2D variate polynomial of degree d, which is multilinear. And we are trying to prove a lower bound for those things. Okay. Now let's come back to this. If the partition turns out to be x's and y's for this term, then this is as large as 2 power d, which is 2 power n by 2. So we're not getting anything. We want to shave something for this. What we know is that if each of these linear polynomials just depend on 2 variables, then taking a random partition will put omega d of these guys into the same bucket, and therefore we won't get anything. Those guys don't contribute to the rank, so you're going to save something. Now what can happen if some of these linear polynomials are very large? If one of these linear polynomials depend on something like, let's say, n by 4 variables, then those n by 4 variables cannot occur in the remaining guys. So that is going to severely restrict how many products you can have. Okay, so in some sense it's like a win-win situation. Either you are in a setting where most of these linear polynomials are very small, in which case the trick that I mentioned is just going to work. Or it is the setting that there are some linear polynomials which are really huge, which means that the total degree has to be small, because you're not left with too many guys. You can't have total degree more than that. So together this will mean that either you get a bound of 2 power 2 power capital D, where D is the degree of these linear polynomials, or you get a bound of, I mean, like, you'll say that a constant fraction of them are going to be put in the same bucket, and therefore you can shove them all to one side. Okay, let me be a little more formal here and just prove this. So here is the main lemma. Okay, let T be a term which looks like L1 through LD, multilinear, on the 2D variables. Okay. Sorry?
With this joint
Yes, with this joint supports. Okay. I want to claim either like D is less than, say, either D is at most D, the number of linear polynomials that you're multiplying is less than D over 4, in which case I'm just going to apply the trivial bound of 2 power D over 4 for this term, or many of the LIs depend on very few variables. Let's say depend on few variables. Okay. So this proof is simple, and just convince yourself that the average. If you are not in this setting, when D is actually very large, let's say D is at least D over 4, you only have 2D variables to work with. And if you have to be on disjoint supports, you can't have all these linear polynomials to depend on many variables. Okay? And a simple averaging argument will tell you that a fairly large fraction of these polynomials is going to depend on, say, at most 5 variables or something. Okay? It needs to be formalized, but this is something that I'll leave you to do. Okay? So a corollary of this, I want to say, under a random partition, I want to say that rank of MF or MT is 2 power D minus something, if I remember right, okay, minus, say, D by 100. Okay? Sorry, this is at most. So by under random partition, I mean with very, very high probability. With very high probability, the rank under a random partition will be at most 2 power D minus D over 100. And the thing is just going to be either it's 2 power D over 4, at most 2 power D over 4, which is of course 2 power D minus D over 100, or you show that there are going to be at least D over 100 of these linear polynomials, which under a random partition will go into the same side of the bucket. So they will not contribute to the rank. So therefore, this is the bound on the rank. And for a random polynomial, you expect this to be like something like 2 power x over 2, which is like 2 power D. So the lower bound you get is something like 2 power D over 100. So, because you have subadditive building block, and the goal, for some explicit polynomial, just take it from me that there are constructions of explicit polynomials for which this is full rank. And this gives the lower bound for multilinear depth 3. Okay? So, was this clear? Right. So for a very high probability, we need to do a Chernoff bound, because you need to bound how many of these linear polynomials get into the same bucket. And Chernoff's bound will tell you that with very high probability, and there is a union bound over the terms. You work out all the details, and then this will tell you that So this implies that any, let me just say, 2 power omega d lower bound, okay, for an explicit polynomial. Okay, so great. So now what did we? I haven't. So, but for example, you could start with the determinant, and you could start with the determinant and project down to very few variables, and we work out parameters. I mean, you project down to something like d variables, so that the number of the degree of the determinant is like half the number of variables. You need to do this carefully, and then you'll get a 2 power n power 1 by 3 sort of lower bound for the determinant. But there are also explicit constructions which are full rank. So let me not get into that. Okay. So what exactly what was the key insight here? So we started off with something. Where was yes, it was here. Good. So we said that, okay, so the building blocks here were a sum of terms over disjoint sets of variables. And you wanted to say that under a random partition, you expect a fair amount of them to not contribute much. And the cumulative sort of effect of many terms not contributing much gives you the sort of lower bound that you have. So the natural thing to try is, like, instead of linear, so the linear polynomials only was useful in the fact that a linear polynomial contributes a 2 if it is split, or something if it is not split. So what Raj did for the multilinear formula lower bound is that, no, let's start with the different sort of building blocks, which are going to be the log products that we kept seeing yesterday. And in the log product also, we'll do something very, very similar. We'll sort of say that every term, I mean, with some reasonable probability, they will not contribute what you expect them to contribute, and together they will give you a deficit. So from this point onwards, I'm going to be more vague, but the details are all there in the two surveys, and should be able to fill in the details for them.
So again, a question about
Sure,
the
yeah.
lower bound. So you say under a random partition, the rank is upper bounded, and that's
Yes.
how you get the lower bound.
So, the thing that I have not done is that there are explicit polynomials such that for every partition, the rank is 2 power d.
So, because the initial example that you gave of the multilinear.
The product of xi plus yi's.
Yes. So this has a partition which is.
Yeah, but that's just one. But under a random partition,
It's not.
it's not.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't recall now how did you get the lower bound, just because of in the average case it's high.
So let's just take this example. So let's say this is xd and yd. Now, if I randomly partition the set of variables into two sets of size d, then the probability that xi and yi go to the same part is like 1/4. Yeah, quarter, half, something. I mean, it's at least a quarter. Yeah. Oh, both sides. Yes, half. Yeah. Okay, it's half. So which means you're going to expect half of these di's could fall on the same part. So by Chernoff, it will tell you that at least 1/3 of the di's are going to certainly fall on the same part with very, very high probability. So the rank here is going to be bounded by 2 power d minus d by 3 with very, very high probability. And that is just a much, I'm obviously not being tight there. But so, I can't hope to prove, this is not the explicit polynomial for which I'm going to prove the lower bound, because this obviously has a small multilinear formula. So, but there are explicit polynomials for which under all partitions, the rank is full. I have not described.
Under all partitions.
Yeah, and I haven't done that, and it's there. Yeah. Okay. How much time do I have? 10 minutes. Okay. Good. Okay. Maybe I'll use this part again. So let me just recall a little bit about the log product decompositions that we looked at. So we have some formula. In this case, it's a multilinear formula. And so what we said was we can find a node V such that the subtree rooted at V has size between 2/3 and 1/3 of the total size. You can find some intermediate node. And as I said yesterday, there are many potential functions that you could use for this. The size of the subtree is one such example. You could have used the degree. And then you could also do the following. So there is some node V that depends on like less than 2n by 3 and greater than 2n by 3 variable. Greater than n by 3 variables. Clearly this grammar is terrible. This was that number of vars that V depends on. This is intermediate. This is like 2n by 3 and at least n by 3. The same trick will work just because of the fact that the number of nodes that a V can depend on is at most the number of nodes of my left child and my right child. So therefore you will find a node of intermediate this thing. So therefore you can write f as a times the polynomial computed at V plus B, just like last time. Now you do induction on V and B. So you will end up with something that very similar to what we saw last time, something like gi1 through gi order log n, where this guy depends on something like between 1/3 and 2/3 n. This guy will depend on something like 1 by 9 and 4 by 9 n, and so on. So the number of variables that each gi depends on are going to geometrically decrease. And they are still going to be, the supports are going to be disjoint and everything. And the number of summons is the size of the polynomial. So this is a log product decomposition that we saw a version of this yesterday, and the same thing works if you work with the number of variables rather than the size or the degree. Okay. Now this is going to be the building block. So it's something that looks like g1 of x1, some gr of xr, where these xi's are disjoint. Right. So right now what I know is that the number of variables that each gi depends on are geometrically decreasing. So at some point some of these gi's will depend on very few variables, let's say constantly many variables. But let me just club the last few guys together and assume that each xi is at least something like square root n. Okay, because they're going down slowly, I still have order log n guys that depend on at least square root n variables. Okay, cool. Now here's the thing. I want to now look at a term of this sort and take a random partition and then figure out what do I expect the rank of these gi's to be. Okay. No, I know nothing about the gi's right now because these gi's could be arbitrary. So for all I know, when I take a random partition, the rank of gi could be full. Okay. But if x is the union of these xi's, and if I split x into a balanced partition of y union z, now each xi will now split as some yi union zi. Okay. If I'm really unlucky, what could happen is that the size of yi could be equal to size of zi for everything, and it so happens that each gi is full rank with respect to that partition yi zi, in which case I'm not gaining anything. But the point is, when I'm taking a random partition of y and z, it's very, very unlikely that each of these xi's are going to be split exactly. Okay. So something that you can interpret this as saying, because I'm splitting each xi into yi and zi, think of it like I'm starting off with the variables in xi, and I'm going to toss a coin. With probability half, I'm going to put it in yi. With probability half, I'm going to put it in zi. This is not quite the same thing because the sizes are bounded, but it's a good approximation for the probabilities that are happening. Okay. And so the expected size of yi is going to be the size of xi divided by 2, but it's a Gaussian, right? So what this means is that it's something that looks like this. So it's going to be very concentrated around the expectation. But if you look very close to the expectation, the probabilities are not going to be that different. So what I'm trying to claim is that if I toss n coins, and this is like n over 2, if I'm tossing n coins, then I know that the mass is like, with very, very high probability, I'm going to fall within a range of order square root n of n over 2. But even if the probability that I take the value, let's say n over 2 minus fourth root of n or something, is still going to be large enough. Right? In some sense, around this band, you're going to be more or less equal. I mean, it's going to drop when you go beyond the square root n band, but around n over 2, you're going to be equal. So I'm hand waving here. I just want to say that the probability the probability that size of let's say the min of the size of yi comma zi, okay, this is the probability that this size is less than mod size of xi by 2 minus, let's say, n to the 100. I mean, all I mean by that is the probability that you're slightly imbalanced, in the sense that it's not just exactly cardinality xi by 2, but you're off by some small factor. This probability is still something like 1 over n to the 1000, something. I'm just putting in some numbers there, but for different values of hundreds and thousands, this is true. So this requires a calculation, and you need to work with not the Gaussian, but something that's called the hypergeometric distribution. But it should be pretty clear that the probability that each of these xi's are going to be exactly split is going to be small. So with reasonable probability, a lot of these xi's are going to be off from the exact split by something. And sorry? Yeah. Right. Huh. Oh, sorry. Uh-huh. Oh, sorry. What I'm right. Yeah. Okay. So this means that with reasonable probability, a lot of these guys are going to be split. Now here is a good thing about matrices. If I look at the partition with respect to xi and yi and zi of the polynomial gi, the matrix is a very skewed matrix in the sense that one of the sides is much smaller than the other side because they didn't get split evenly. And the nice thing about this is that because of the fact that row rank is equal to column rank, this says that the rank of this matrix is not cardinality x over 2 or 2 power cardinality x over 2, but off from 2 power x over 2 by whatever this deficit is. Okay, and again, a similar union bound will sort of say that that each of these guys are going to be, each of these guys are going to contribute something like exponential in n power 1 over 100, and together you will get a bound away from n over 2 with something. Right? Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Okay. Now. So because I'm not getting into the details of the calculation, let me just sort of pay some attention to something. At the moment, it looks like you're getting an exponential in n over 100 gain over 2 power n by 2. But the lower bound I'm proving here is just n power omega log n. And this was Ankit's point in the sense that, okay, you need to really bound what is the probability that a fair amount of the probability that one of these guys are going to be split unevenly. That probability is that much. So what's the probability that this guy is not going to be split unevenly? That's like 1 over n to the 1000. It's very, very low probability that this good event won't happen. Now, eventually, I need to do a union bound over all the.
So the point is that you are taking products of log n partition, log n sets. So for each of them, you want to see how much value there is.
Right, and the probability that there is even one guy which is not balanced turns out to be something like 1 over n power 1000 log n, because I have order log n such terms. And eventually I need to do a union bound on the size. And I still want to claim that with reasonable probability I'm going to get some gain from every term. So the n to the log n lower bound comes from this union bound, not from the rank this thing. So these are things which perhaps, I mean, like once you do the calculations, you will really see that this is what really happens. And this was a very, very brief sketch of what Raz did. And just to say a little more, for instead of multilinear formulas, suppose you want to say, now I want to prove lower bounds for just multilinear depth 10 formulas. You can improve the log product to something like n power 1 over 10 product. And then the union bound will get better. So you will get better lower bounds. So, but even for all these things, the measure that is used is basically the rank of the partial derivative matrix under a random partition. And yeah, so these are some of the basic lower bounds that are there, and after lunch we'll switch gears and Michael will talk about PIT and the connections with these lower bounds and so on. Yeah.